Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where climate change is always the top story. I wish there were two of me. I wish there were 48 hours in a day. Wish I had a whole lot more time to cover this year climate change, because I could literally spend a better part of the day going through these articles, and I have a backlog that you wouldn't believe. But just try to grab what is relevant in the moment and what is also interesting. And it all kind of adds up to the big picture. You know what's happening. First of all, I want to start with a couple of comments from the last video that I thought were quite good. Listen, guys, just wanted to say, I'm going to talk about politics. I'm going to talk about stuff that's not just climate change. It's just going to happen. So, every time I do, just please don't freak out. Please don't downvote all the videos. Come on. If you support this channel, just support this channel. If you don't agree with what I have to say, just leave me a comment. Have a debate with me. Whatever you like, but just, support this channel. Don't just like, oh, I don't like you're talking about this. It's not really, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just like, it's a little goofy. It seems like a little goofy to me, but whatever. This isn't a climate change only channel. I mean, it's mainly about climate change, but I'm talking about other things. There are other things in the world to talk about. And politics are definitely part of it. And I'm a little bit of a political junkie, so just know that. I like to talk about politics, darn it. I like to talk about a lot of things. It's just as interesting to me as psychology or philosophy or whatever. I'm going to start again. Where are we? Where am I? 2 comments, 1 person, both by Harley Canine. First comment is, and just FYI, in case it wasn't made clear enough to you in the last race, the Democrats will never allow Sanders to be candidate for president. Actually, both the Dems and Republicans, as I even told my wife, that if Clinton wins the Democratic nomination, Trump wins the presidency. But if Sanders got it, he wins. I was right. Well, at least on the Clinton side. LOL, but I'm sure I would have been right about Bernie too. I wholeheartedly agree, and I had so many arguments with people over the same exact thing. We'll never know whether Bernie would have won against Trump, but he clearly was more popular than Hillary Clinton. His popularity was not manufactured by the media, the mainstream media, and by billions and billions of dollars funneled into her foundation, her and her husband's foundation. Tell me somebody who's filling 20,000 seat stadiums without any help from the mainstream media would not have won the presidency had he had actual coverage from the mainstream media. People would have just went. People were going nuts over Bernie Sanders, and they would have just went. They would have been like Bernie, Trump. That's what would have happened. Anyways, the next comment from Hillary Canine. Sorry, man, Harley Canine. You can give Trump about as much credit for climate change as you can give the rooster credit for the dawn. Sure, his policies and attitude are in direct conflict with stopping climate change, but the damage has been done long before he came around by Democrats and Republicans alike. Hear, hear. And that's very true. Ironically, the president most responsible for the uptick in climate change, even if inadvertently so, is Clinton. With the signing of the trade agreement in China, he single-handedly signed over the future of our planet's environment to a country that couldn't care less about it, or people for that matter. But nobody wants to talk about that. And wasn't he the one that ushered in NAFTA? Wasn't that Clinton? I believe it was. That also, all of those things, you know, that led to offshoring all of our industry to other nations so that we didn't have to worry about it. But I believe also some of that stuff started with Nixon. When did we start really opening up to China and saying like, hey, you know what we should do? We should build factories over there. It would be awesome. And there's also lots of other countries in the region that we really enjoyed buying their cheap goods from, aka Japan, India, Indonesia, etc., etc. But I enjoyed both those quotes from Harley. Thank you. Moving on, Remnants. This is from USA Today, published today by Doyle Rice. Remnants of Hurricane Willa to help fuel powerful East Coast nor'easter, which I think is already, they've got some extreme weather going on in the Northeast. Hurricane Willa may be gone, but some of the remnant energy and moisture will help fuel the first nor'easter of the season for the East Coast this weekend, the National Weather Service said. Power outages, travel delays, flooding, rough surf, and widespread miserable conditions, quote unquote, are all likely from the storm, AccuWeather said. Rain and wind will spread up the East Coast Friday through Saturday night or early Sunday. The worst weather will be from Virginia to Maine. From Virginia to Maine, that's pretty wide area there. Excuse me, I'm not timing this video. At this time, it looks like the storm will bring a general 1 to 2 inches of rain and a period of 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts to the coast. Since it's only October, however, most of the precipitation that falls this weekend will be rain, so snow shovels won't be needed for most folks. Some of the higher elevations of northern New England and the interior Northeast could see some wet snow from the storm. A combination of rain, wind, and low cloud ceiling is likely to lead to airline delays and slow travel on area highways. Even before the nor'easter lashes the East Coast, the South will see a soggy couple of days as the remnants of Willa emerge with other weather systems. After a rainy day Wednesday in waterlogged Texas, the heaviest rain Thursday will be along the Gulf Coast from Mississippi to Florida. The downpours will expand eastward along the central Gulf Coast by Wednesday and Thursday and eventually target areas of the Florida Panhandle and Georgia that were ravaged by powerful Hurricane Michael. They just cannot get out of the way of these storm systems. Early Wednesday, Hurricane Willa weakened rapidly into a tropical depression after slamming into a stretch of beach towns, fishing villages, and farms along Mexico's Pacific coast as a Category 3 storm late Tuesday. That's a pretty big storm. Willa hit the mainland near Isle del Bosque, Mexico, which is about 50 miles southeast of the tourist town of Mazatlan. Moving on. This is from earlier this summer. This is from Common Dreams, published July 31st, 2018 by Stacy Bannerman. Is climate the worst casualty of war? The money misspent on the Iraq War, a war for oil, let's not forget, could have purchased the planetary conversion to renewable energy. Just sit with that a moment. How do you clear a room of climate activists? Start talking about war. It's not just environmentalists that leave, it's pretty much everyone. Mission accomplished by the Bush administration, which sent the military and their families to war and the rest of the country to an amusement park. The military-civilian divide has been called an epidemic of disconnection. But the biosphere doesn't see uniforms, and the environmental devastation caused by bombs, burn pits, and depleted uranium cannot be contained to a combat zone. We haven't counted the massive carbon footprint of America's endless wars because military missions abroad have a blanket exemption from both national reporting requirements and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. There will be no exemptions in the coming climate collapse. We've all got skin in the war game now. The cost of America's post-9/11 wars is approaching $6 trillion, and the price tag will continue to climb right along with sea levels, temperatures, atmospheric CO2, and methane, a particularly potent greenhouse gas. And we can look forward to an escalation in global food insecurity, climate refugees, and release of long dormant, potentially highly lethal bacteria and viruses. Research published in the Journal of Pediatrics in May 2018 revealed that children are estimated to bear 88% of the burden of disease related to climate change. Nevertheless, public health agencies don't discuss what war costs our climate when they discuss what climate change will cost our children. Religious communities are mobilizing on the behalf of the healing and protection of the planet, but with few exceptions, such as MLK's Poor People's Campaign, resurrected by a trio of ministers, the topic of America's literal war on the world is still off the table. Although he surely knows creation is God's cathedral, His Holiness Pope Francis spent only a handful of words on the ecology of war in the beautifully rendered Laudato Si on care for our common home. And the big environmental organizations seem to have tacitly agreed that U.S. military is the entity we won't talk about when we talk about the biggest contributors to climate change. Just to interject, yes, I know when I was talking about voting or politics in the last video that I understand that we are very far away from being able to vote for anybody who is close to being able to do something about our current state of affairs in any meaningful way. I totally get it. I totally get it. At the same time, I'm just not the person that's going to be like, screw it, I can't do anything about this, or my vote doesn't count, or screw voting. I'm sure there are much more effective ways to initiate change rather than going to the polls, but it's a very small way in which I like to try. And if I'm moving the needle even a little bit, whatever. That being said, I'm not really very happy about the Democrats or where the Democratic Party is on any level. But I try to suss out the candidates that I think at least hold a closer value to my values. So whether that be a green candidate or a blue candidate, I can't see any red candidate being anywhere close. I'm sorry, I just can't get there. It's just like joining the dark side. I'm just not going to do it. And there's just nobody out there. There isn't. But I would like to see, Medicare for all, or Medi-Cal for all. I'd like to see, somebody speak about stopping the war machine. I would like to see, free college for people. Those are okay things. Those are okay things to vote for. In the meantime, while we're waiting for everything else to fall apart, come on. Anyways, the Pentagon uses more petroleum per day than the aggregate consumption of 175 countries out of 210 in the world, and generates more than 70% of this nation's total greenhouse gas emissions based on rankings in the CIA World Factbook. Ooh, CIA World Factbook. I need one of those. The U.S. Air Force burns through 2.4 billion gallons of jet fuel a year. 2.4 billion gallons of jet fuel a year. All of it derived from oil. I wonder what, hold on one second. I'm going to see what the civilian aviation industry burns a year. I don't know if this is right or not, but 2012 had world jet fuel consumption at 4 million barrels of oil a year. What is that in gallons? Oh, well, we can compare it to the barrels annually. So that's 2.4 billion gallons, I guess, is so since the start of the post 9/11 wars, U.S. military fuel consumption has averaged about 144 million barrels annually. So that's just insane. So if the world fuel consumption, jet fuel consumption, is something like close to 5 million barrels, or even not even 10, and they're using 144 million barrels. Whoa. According to, I don't even know if that computes or if that even sounds right. According to Steve Kretzman, director of Oil Change International, the Iraq War was responsible for at least 141 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. From March 2003 through December 2007, that's more CO2 equivalent than 60% of all countries. Those figures are only from the first 4 years. We downsized the war in December of 2011, but still haven't left. So the U.S. invasion and 15 years of occupation has likely generated upward of 400 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent to date. Money misspent on that war, or war for oil, let's not forget, could have purchased the planetary conversion to renewable energy. Just sit without a moment, then stand up and get back to work, please. We've got wind farms to build and pipelines to stop. We've got solar panels to install and water to protect. We need torchbearers from every tribe and nation to walk the green path and light the 8th fire. But to do so while continuing to feed the fossil-fueled military beast, chewing up nearly 60% of the national budget, is an energy inefficient and environmentally self-defeating. We cannot cure this man-made cancer on the climate without addressing underlying causes. In order to achieve the massive systemic and cultural transformations required for mitigating climate change and advancing climate justice, we're going to have to deal with the socially sanctioned, institutionalized violence perpetrated by U.S. foreign policy that is pouring fuel on the fire of global warming. The Department of Defense has the largest carbon footprint of any enterprise on the planet. The Department of Defense is the single greatest manufacturer and disseminator of tools and toxins like Agent Orange and nuclear waste that are inherently destructive to ecosystems. Nearly 70% of the U.S. environmental disasters classified Superfund sites by the EPA have been caused by the Pentagon, which is the primary polluter of U.S. waterways. There should be no surprise then that at least 126 military bases have contaminated water, causing cancer and birth defects in service members and their families. So much for supporting the troops. We have to replace the flawed patriotism, desperately clinging to the idea that we can't win without war, all evidence to the contrary, with a bipartisan paradigm so powerfully devoted to liberty and justice and freedom for all that creating an intelligent, muscular peace becomes a national priority. If we do not, we will never become the America we have said that we are. In the end, it's what we haven't included in the cost of war that may end up costing the most. We simply cannot continue the moral, spiritual, fiscal, or environmental policy of benign neglect that underwrites the decimation of land, air, and water around the world. That, my green friends, is the single most unsustainable policy on this nation's books. I know a lot of friends have decided not to speak out about war in order to avoid being labeled a traitor or accused of being anti-military. Guess what? I'm anti-military. If we learn nothing else, and it seems we have not from the Iraq War, we learn that silence is a luxury we cannot afford when lives are on the line. The hands of the doomsday clock are 2 minutes from midnight. Life itself is on the line. It is time to find your voice. We have to defrock the sacred cow grazing at the Pentagon, because climate may be the worst casualty of all. My whole existence was a casualty of the Iraq War, and too many of my friends have gotten a gold star. I don't use the word casualty lightly. When I tell you that the pain of losing everything you love because of war is a pain you do not want, I beg you to believe me. We have to keep working to keep it in the ground. But if we don't get serious about stopping the United States war machine, we could lose the biggest battle of our lives. Indeed. War is reprehensible. War is unsupportable. War is not giving us anything but in the end, our own demise. You want to support troops? Tell people to stop joining the military. You want to support troops? Bring the troops home, end the wars. I've heard it on quite a few channels. One channel I follow, and I really like this channel, even though it's become more of a conservative channel. But the guy I listen to, I don't know. He trips me out most of the time, and I don't know where he's going. But he has really good insights about things. And one of the things that he says is that if the Democrats want to win an election, if the Democrats became an anti-war party, if the Democrats made one of their platforms, we're going to bring all the troops home and we're going to end all the wars, he said they would win. They would sweep the House and they would win the presidency. And I actually totally agree with him, because they are completely bought and sold, and they don't stand for anything that the Republicans don't already stand for, really, other than, Medicare and, trying to give people some benefits. But other than that, they're totally corporate, beholden, and they're totally locked into the military, and they're totally pretty much locked into the oil industry as well. But that would be a wonderful thing if they could, suddenly be a party that embraced an anti-war ideology. But so there are people out there, people that you wouldn't even think that actually really want to see an end to war. You'd be surprised. There are some conservatives that do want to see an end to war. Which is actually one of the platforms that helped get Trump elected, even though he bangs the war drums like nobody's business. His international policy has been less hawkish than perhaps Clinton's might have been. Obama was elected on a anti-war hawk policy, and then he turned around and continued to have us engage in wars and undeclared wars all over the place. So yeah, he failed on that promise, as well as a few others. I'm going to move on. This is from The Independent. This is by Josh Gabatis, and this is 6 days ago. Largest living thing on Earth is dying after decades of human interference, scientists say. Thought to be thousands of years old, cloned forest in Utah is collapsing on our watch. Scientists have warned that an ancient forest, widely considered the largest single living thing in the world, is dying despite efforts to preserve it. The Pando aspen is an enormous expanse of 40,000 trees, all of which are clones with identical genetic compositions, meaning they are classified together as one individual. Thought to be up to 80,000 years old, the colony known as the Trembling Giant is a contender for the oldest organism as well as the heaviest and largest. In total, the trees, which originate from a single underground parent clone, cover 43 hectares of Utah's Fish Lake National Forest. But in recent years, the tragedy has been quietly unfurling. Despite their best efforts, scientists think this natural wonder that has lasted millennia may not survive a few decades of human interference. While Pando has likely existed for thousands of years, we have no method of firmly fixing its age. It is now collapsing on our watch, said Professor Paul Rogers, an ecologist at Utah State University. After analyzing Pando's condition comprehensively, Professor Rogers and his colleague, Professor Darren McAvoy, examined a 72-year-old aerial photo sequence that revealed its steady decline. The forest has gradually thinned as humans expanded into it, cutting down areas that have never properly recovered. Additional pressure over the years has come from drought and the intrusion of hungry deer into the forest that have hampered efforts to restore it. After significant investment in protecting the iconic Pando clone, we are disappointed in this result. Early efforts to protect the forest from deer using fencing and allowing young shoots to grow showed some promise. However, when these methods were expanded across a larger area, they failed to prevent animals from getting in. Professor Rogers said deer appeared to be finding ways to either enter through weak points or somehow hopping the 8-foot barrier. In his role as director of the Western Aspen Alliance, Professor Rogers has seen the trends recorded in Pando playing out across the aspen forests of the western states. In addition to ecological values, Pando serves as a symbol of nature-human connectedness and a harbinger of broader species loss. Here, regionally and indeed internationally, aspen forests support great biodiversity. As it has often proved difficult to measure the true extent of such enormous organisms, Pando has some contenders for the largest living thing, including massive fungi growing in Oregon and clonal colonies of underwater Neptune grass. And I'm also going to link this video from Robert Fanny. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? This is from a few days ago, Arctic Sea Ice Weather and Climate Update for October 22nd. It's just basically going through, there's a lot of, again, and still heat incursion into the Arctic, and it's not, the Arctic refreeze is happening much slower than it might usually happen were we not in the middle of abrupt climate change. But you'll never hear Robert Fanny say the words abrupt climate change. I don't think I've heard him say that. Nah, he won't say that. Anyways, I'm going to link this article here. Another comment on the channel. Who's this from? Hold on. I think it's from Hugh Jazzle. Linking Svalbard weather, the temperature forecast for the next 10 days. Basically the lows. So the highs are all in the low 50s, but the lows are all above 40, which basically means the lows are higher than the average annual temperature highs should be right now. So very warm in Svalbard. Again, backing up what Robert Fanny is talking about in his video. I believe that's all I have for you on this video. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.